The two police officers standing at my doorstep looked uncomfortable as they shifted their weight from foot to foot. Behind them, a woman with a severely tight bun and designer sunglasses perched on her head like a crown was gesturing wildly, her voice carrying across my front yard. "I want him arrested for trespassing," she screeched, pointing a manicured finger in my direction. "He harassed my guests on community property." I remained calm, reaching for the folder I had prepared just for this moment. "Officers, I have some documents you might want to see," I said evenly, handing over the guest list, printed screenshots of my security footage, and certified copies of my property records. The younger officer studied the papers while his partner watched the woman continue her theatrical performance. After a moment, he looked up at me, then turned to face her. "Ma'am," he said slowly, as if explaining something to a child, "these weren't your guests. They were trespassing on private property." The look on her face was priceless. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from smiling. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment when HOA President Brenda Garrison finally realized she had pushed the wrong person too far. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. 6 months ago, I moved into what I thought would be my dream home in the Sunset Ridge neighborhood. The property came with a private dock on Crystal Lake and a spacious backyard that bordered the community park. The realtor had been very clear about the property lines, showing me exactly where my land ended and the HOA-maintained area began. What she hadn't warned me about was Brenda Garrison, the self-appointed queen of our little suburban kingdom. At 5'2" with bottle blonde hair and a wardrobe that screamed, "I peaked in high school," Brenda ruled the HOA with an iron fist wrapped in passive-aggressive smiles and thinly veiled threats. My first encounter with her came just 2 weeks after I moved in. I was unpacking boxes in my garage when she marched up my driveway, clipboard in hand. "You must be the new resident," she announced, not bothering with pleasantries. "I'm Brenda Garrison, HOA President. I need to inform you about our community standards." What followed was a 20-minute lecture about grass height, approved mailbox colors, and the proper way to display holiday decorations. I nodded politely, figuring it was best to play nice with the neighbors. That was my first mistake. The real problems started about 2 months later. I came home from a business trip on a Saturday afternoon to find my backyard transformed into Party Central. There were at least 30 people lounging in my deck chairs, using my grill, and blasting music from a speaker system set up near my shed. Empty beer cans littered my carefully maintained lawn, and someone had even strung lights between my trees. I stood there for a moment, wondering if I had somehow forgotten hosting a party. Then I saw Brenda holding court near my dock, regaling a group of women with what sounded like gossip about another neighbor's divorce. "Excuse me," I called out, trying to keep my voice level. "What's going on here?" Brenda turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, you're back. Don't worry, we're just using the overflow area for my annual summer social." The community pavilion was getting a bit crowded. "This isn't an overflow area," I said, feeling my patience already wearing thin. "This is my private property." Her laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. "Don't be silly. This area has always been used for community events. The previous owner never minded." I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay professional. "Well, I do mind. I need everyone to leave. Now." The next few minutes were chaos. Some guests immediately started gathering their things, looking embarrassed. Others, emboldened by Brenda's indignant sputtering, argued that they had been told this was community space. One particularly aggressive man named Dale insisted that Brenda had specifically said the dock was HOA property. "She said we could use it any time," Dale slurred, clearly several beers past good judgment. "You can't kick us out of community space." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of my property deed. "This shows exactly where my property line is. You're about 50 feet inside it." More guests started to leave, but Brenda was turning an alarming shade of red. "This is harassment," she shrieked. "You're embarrassing me in front of the entire neighborhood. I'll be reporting this to the HOA board." "Please do," I replied calmly. "And while you're at it, please report that you've been trespassing on private property and allowing others to do the same." She stormed off, her remaining loyal followers trailing behind her like ducklings. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning up their mess, documenting everything with photos and videos. Something told me this wasn't over. I was right. The following Monday, I received an official-looking letter from the HOA board, summoning me to a disciplinary hearing for conduct unbecoming of a community member and harassment of fellow residents. The letter was signed by Brenda herself, of course. I decided to do some research. I pulled up the HOA bylaws, studied the community map, and even hired a surveyor to confirm my property lines. Everything confirmed what I already knew, that my backyard and dock were entirely on my private property, not HOA land. I also installed security cameras, making sure they covered every inch of my property. Call it paranoia, but something told me Brenda wasn't going to let this go. The HOA meeting was a joke. Brenda had stacked the audience with her friends, all of whom glared at me as I entered the community center. She presented her case with the dramatics of a courtroom prosecutor, claiming I had viciously evicted her guests and threatened longtime residents. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly presented my evidence that the property deed, the surveyor's report, and photos from the party showing the mess left behind. The board members looked uncomfortable, especially when I pointed out that Brenda had never asked permission to use my property. "This is ridiculous," Brenda exploded. "We've always used that space. It's tradition." "Tradition doesn't override property law," I responded. "And trespassing is trespassing, regardless of how long you've been doing it." The board ultimately sided with me, but Brenda's expression made it clear this was far from over. She had the look of someone plotting revenge, and I knew I needed to stay vigilant. For the next few weeks, things were quiet. Too quiet. Then came the night that would change everything. It was a Thursday evening, and I was working late in my home office when I heard voices in my backyard. I checked my security camera app and saw 5 people setting up what looked like a small gathering near my dock. I recognized one of them as Dale from the previous party. They were carrying coolers and chairs, acting like they owned the place. I grabbed my phone and headed outside. "Gentlemen," I called out, "you need to leave. This is private property." Dale turned to me with a smirk. "Brenda said we could use the dock for our fishing club meeting. She's the HOA president, so she has the authority." "No, she doesn't," I said firmly. "This is my property. You need to leave now, or I'll have to call the police." "Go ahead," Dale challenged. "Brenda already called them. Said you've been harassing HOA members." That's when I heard the sirens. 2 police cars pulled up to my house, and officers emerged looking serious. Brenda appeared from nowhere, practically running toward them in her designer heels. "Officers, thank God you're here," she cried out with theatrical flair. "This man has been terrorizing our community. He's been threatening people and creating a hostile environment." And that brings us back to where we started, with me calmly handing over my documentation, while Brenda realized her plan was backfiring spectacularly. The senior officer, a no-nonsense woman named Officer Patterson, reviewed my security footage on my phone. It clearly showed the men entering my property without permission and me politely asking them to leave. She then looked at the property records and the HOA bylaws I had thoughtfully printed out. "Mrs. Garrison," Officer Patterson said sternly, "not only were these men trespassing, but you appear to have made a false police report. That's a serious offense." Brenda's face went from red to white in seconds. "But I'm the HOA president. I have authority over all community spaces." "Ma'am, HOA authority doesn't extend to private property," the officer explained with barely concealed frustration. "And calling 911 with false claims is a crime. We could arrest you right now." I watched as Brenda's world began to crumble. The men she had sent to my property were already getting citations for trespassing, and Dale was being given a field sobriety test that he was clearly going to fail. "However," Officer Patterson continued, "since no actual harm was done, we're going to let you off with a warning this time. But if we get called out here again for false claims, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" Brenda nodded mutely, all her bluster gone. As the police prepared to leave, Officer Patterson pulled me aside. "You might want to consider getting a restraining order," she suggested quietly. People like her don't usually give up easily. I thanked her for the advice, but I had a different plan in mind. You see, Brenda had made a fatal error. She had involved law enforcement in her petty vendetta, and now there was an official record of her behavior. It was time to use that to my advantage. Over the next week, I compiled everything that had happened. The trespassing incidents, the false police report, the misuse of HOA authority. I also did some digging and discovered that Brenda had been using HOA funds to purchase supplies for her community events that were actually private parties. She had been billing the HOA for food, decorations, and even alcohol that she used for personal gatherings. I reached out to other neighbors and found I wasn't alone. Tom from 2 streets over told me how Brenda had tried to fine him $500 for having his grass 1/4 inch too tall. Sarah from the next block shared how Brenda had attempted to force her to remove a wheelchair ramp, claiming it wasn't aesthetically approved, even though it was medically necessary for Sarah's mother. The stories kept coming. Brenda had been ruling through intimidation and selective enforcement of rules, targeting anyone who questioned her authority. But now, people were ready to speak up. I contacted a lawyer friend who specialized in HOA law. He reviewed everything and assured me that we had more than enough to remove Brenda from her position. The false police report alone was grounds for immediate removal, according to the HOA bylaws. We scheduled our attack for the next monthly HOA meeting. I made sure to notify everyone who had shared their stories with me, and word spread quickly through the neighborhood grapevine. For the first time in years, the community center was packed for an HOA meeting. Brenda arrived fashionably late, as always, clearly expecting to preside over another boring meeting where she could rubber stamp her own agenda. Her face when she saw the packed room was a priceless combination of surprise and suspicion. "Well," she said with forced cheer as she took her place at the front, "what a wonderful turnout. I suppose everyone wants to hear about the new landscape requirements I'm proposing." "Actually," I stood up, holding my thick folder of evidence, "I'd like to propose we address a more pressing matter. The conduct of our current HOA president." The room went silent. Brenda's smile froze on her face. "Excuse me? This isn't on the agenda." According to Article 7, Section 3 of the bylaws, I read from my prepared notes, any member can raise a motion for board review if it pertains to potential misconduct by board members. Her eyes narrowed. "And what misconduct are you alleging?" I opened my folder and began presenting my evidence methodically. The false police report, complete with the official report number and Officer Patterson's notes. The misuse of HOA funds, with receipts and bank statements I had obtained through a formal records request. The pattern of harassment against multiple homeowners, with signed statements from Tom, Sarah, and 6 others. As I spoke, I could see the other board members growing increasingly uncomfortable. They had apparently been unaware of the extent of Brenda's behavior, or perhaps they had simply been too intimidated to act. "This is character assassination," Brenda interrupted, her voice shrill. "These are all misunderstandings and exaggerations." "Is it a misunderstanding that you filed a false police report?" I asked calmly. "Because I have the officer's body cam footage right here if anyone would like to see it." The room erupted in murmurs. Several people called out for the footage to be played. I connected my laptop to the meeting room's projector and played the relevant clip, showing Brenda claiming I had threatened and harassed people, followed by Officer Patterson reviewing my evidence and warning Brenda about filing false reports. When the video ended, the room was silent except for Brenda's heavy breathing. Her face had turned an alarming shade of purple. "I'd like to make a motion," said Robert Daniels, the HOA treasurer who had always seemed uncomfortable with Brenda's tactics. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in our current president." "Seconded," called out at least 5 voices simultaneously. "You can't do this," Brenda shrieked, all pretense of composure gone. "I've been president for 8 years. This community needs me. Without me, property values will plummet. The neighborhood will fall apart. All in favor of removing Brenda Garrison as HOA president?" Robert asked, ignoring her outburst. Hands shot up around the room. I did a quick count, at least 40 out of the 50 or so attendees. All opposed. Only 3 hands went up, all belonging to Brenda's inner circle. "The motion passes," Robert announced. "Brenda Garrison is hereby removed as HOA president, effective immediately." What happened next was like something out of a movie. Brenda stood up so fast her chair toppled over. She grabbed the gavel she had wielded like a weapon for so many years and threw it across the room, narrowly missing poor Mrs. Chen's head. "You'll all regret this," she screamed, mascara running down her cheeks. "I'll sue every last one of you. I'll make your lives miserable. You think you've won? This isn't over." She stormed toward the exit, but in her rage and tears, she misjudged the door and walked straight into the glass panel next to it. The impact sent her designer sunglasses flying off her head, and she stumbled backward, dazed. For a moment, no one moved. Then Tom stepped forward to help her up, because despite everything, we weren't monsters. She slapped his hand away and struggled to her feet on her own. "Don't touch me," she snarled. "None of you deserve my leadership. This neighborhood will be a ghetto within 6 months without me." She finally found the actual door and fled, leaving behind a room full of stunned neighbors. After a moment of silence, someone started clapping. Soon, the entire room erupted in applause and relieved laughter. Robert took charge of the rest of the meeting with calm efficiency. A special election would be held in 2 weeks to choose a new president. In the meantime, he would serve as interim president. His first official act was to void all pending fines that Brenda had issued in the last 6 months, and to initiate a full audit of HOA finances. 2 weeks later, we elected Margaret Stone as our new HOA president. Margaret was everything Brenda wasn't: quiet, fair, reasonable, and actually interested in improving the neighborhood rather than ruling it. Her first initiative was to clearly mark all property boundaries between private homes and HOA common areas. She also introduced a motion to install a proper fence between my property and the community park, with an attractive gate that would prevent any future misunderstandings about where HOA property ended and mine began. The motion passed unanimously. The final insult to Brenda came when the new board discovered she owed the HOA nearly $3,000 for personal expenses she had charged to the community account. They sent her a certified letter demanding repayment within 30 days or legal action would be taken. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she paid it, but not without sending a rambling, bitter email to the entire HOA email list about how ungrateful everyone was. Robert promptly removed her from the email list. These days, I can enjoy my backyard and private dock in peace. The new fence is actually quite attractive, with climbing roses that bloom in the spring. And Brenda? Well, she still lives in the neighborhood, but she keeps to herself now. Sometimes I see her walking her designer dog the long way around the lake, forced to take the public path that adds an extra half-mile to her route. She has to walk right past my dock, the very dock she once claimed as her own personal party space. She always keeps her eyes straight ahead, her spine rigid with indignation. The best part came last month when I was hosting a completely legal, properly authorized barbecue on my own property. As Brenda Power walked past with her bedazzled Yorkshire Terrier, one of my guests called out cheerfully, "Hey Brenda, want to join us?" She walked faster, pretending not to hear, while her little dog yapped at us indignantly. It was perfect. The final twist came when the financial audit revealed Brenda had been misusing HOA funds for years. The board filed criminal charges for embezzlement. She was convicted of misdemeanor theft and sentenced to 200 hours of community service plus restitution of $15,000 in misappropriated funds. The look on her face when the judge read the sentence, her jaw dropping as she realized she'd have to spend weekends picking up trash in the very parks she once ruled over, that was true justice.